idea that my husband and his military brothers and sisters watched us leave Bagram Air Force Base in the middle of the night without telling our allies who stood shoulder to shoulder with us for decades because we asked them to be there. Think about what that told our friends. More importantly, think about what that told our enemies. And now you have Congress saying to you, do we support Ukraine or do we support Israel? Do we support Israel or do we secure the border? Don't let them lie to you like that. They know that's a lie, that's a false premise, and you shouldn't fall for it.
Hey guys, hope you're well. Wanted to give you my analysis of the Nikki Haley event in Rochester, New Hampshire that happened today, Wednesday, or now technically Thursday at this point. And really interesting experience. Quite a few people at Nikki Haley's event. I would say is about 300 to 400 people, so certainly a good amount. And when I went to Trump's rally in New Hampshire, the stadium that was 75% full, 70 to 75%, he had about probably 600 to 700 people. So the chasm between them and the actual interest on the ground is actually not that massive compared to Dean Phillips or Marianne Williamson, obviously, who got a lot less people, or even Ron DeSantis, who couldn't get this many people. It does show that she has momentum on the ground. And first things first, talking with voters, did the results in Iowa mean a damn thing? The answer is no. I don't think voters follow elections like political pundits do. But if I want to put on my pundit hat, I should give you a brief overview of the recent developments that happened within the last 2 days. And that is two things. One, Trump has gone after Haley even more significantly, and you'll hear her respond. No surprise there. And two polls have been released. One is the American Research Group, which is a local New Hampshire poll. And they noted in the poll that Trump was at 44%. And Haley was also at 44%. So they were directly tied, although Vivek Ramaswamy, because this is done before Vivek dropped out, he was at 4%. So you could pretty much add 3 to 4% to Trump, but that still puts her within winning distance. That's the good news if you're a Haley fan. The bad news if you're a Haley supporter is Suffolk University, which I would trust them a little less because they're not local. So the local ones you kind of tend to trust more because they actually know how to poll their own citizens. But Suffolk University poll had Trump at 51% and Haley at a pretty dismal 38%. So if that's the final result, 51 to 38, that looks pretty bad. The final result is Haley wins by a point or two or loses to Trump by a point or two, then she probably will have some very good momentum. So wanted to give you an analysis as to what the most recent developments were. Obviously, Vivek Ramaswamy dropped out, endorsed Trump. So he has a little momentum. Larry Hogan, the former Maryland governor who was thinking about running himself, very moderate, quite liberal, decided to endorse Nikki Haley. So they're all getting their supporters at this event. No surprise, Kristen Sununu, the New Hampshire governor, introduced her. And I was generally impressed by what I saw. Haley's speech was predictable. I could even mouth along some of what she was saying because I've watched all the debates and I've watched her speak before. And she has these expressions that you kind of hear over and over. So everything was very slick, very polished. Also, in terms of the footage of the debate, you'll see some decent footage and some not decent footage. The sound is unilaterally pretty good, but I was trying to film with my DSLR camera, and the Haley people were so paranoid, they were trying to, they asked me to put the camera away, and then I went somewhere else, and then somebody else asked me to put the camera, and then I could only do phone, and then I kept having to move around. These guys were so on edge. They're so afraid that there's some Trump supporter that's trying to screw around with everything. They need to be a little less careful and kind of relax a little bit. But yeah, they did not like me having my DSLR camera. So I didn't get Haley's entire event. I wanted to get her entire event, although you could probably see that elsewhere. And again, the stuff that she said wasn't necessarily new, although it's certainly worth discussing and worth watching her full remarks to kind of identify anything interesting. And first, we'll start with how is her speaking style? How is her presentation? Did she inspire anybody? You know, again, I'm going to be pretty objective and sort of call it as I see it. So I told you guys last time, looking at Haley's speech in Iowa, that I kind of felt like it was lackluster. It didn't have the charisma, and it sort of fell flat. She wasn't able to really inspire people, at least in that room, or at least for the people watching television, watching her speech. This time around, she made a lot more jokes. She got a lot more personal, and she was incredibly substantive. But she came off finally as kind of more inspirational, certainly more charismatic. had some soaring oratory in her voice, kind of playing off of Obama. So she's getting better and better at that. And people in the room were certainly inspired and enthusiastic. And that's one last thing I'll say before I get into the crux of her speech. The polling has it where her supporters are not enthusiastic. I must have met 20 people. Most were not, didn't want to be interviewed or not worth interviewing. But to get their perspective, all of them were incredibly enthusiastic over Nikki Haley. So I think that if you actually go to the ground, you find out this real information, and that kind of plays against this general media narrative that people are very lackluster in her campaign. So her speech was very good. It was probably one of the more substantive speeches I've seen. And you compare her to Trump, whose rally I went to in mid-December, who was essentially just rambling. And he said, yes, we want to secure the borders, but he didn't talk about how. Nikki Haley, and I'll show you a clip of this, is the only one talking about E-Verify, which is really the kind of simple solution to immigration that nobody's talking about. And the reason nobody is talking about it is because it hurts corporations. So kind of admired the guts of Nikki Haley to talk about it, but she says E-Verify. And the reason that Canada doesn't have this massive, it's only 2% Latino, doesn't have this massive influx of immigrants from Mexico and Central America, all those people are automatically accepted as tourists to Canada, unlike in the U.S., where it's much different. But the reason that there's not this problem, and no, it's not geography, all that's bullshit, or it's too cold, it's like, fuck you. Immigrants go to Michigan. So I really hate that stupid argument. The reason they actually don't go to Canada is because there's no work permissions. It's as simple as that. Is the government has an E-Verify system, and they punish people for hiring immigrants. Again, any Mexican who wants to fly to Canada, and I've dated some young ladies from Mexico, so I know this firsthand. They're automatically accepted, or people from Central American countries. But they'll pay the coyote and do all the risk to get to the U.S. because they're able to work. Ironically, now Canada it needs more low-level employees. Their immigration used to be all about allowing highly educated people. I lived in Yuma, Arizona for a while, and would go across the border twice a week to Mexicali, which is in Mexico. And in Mexicali, all these scientists say, work in Canada, work in Canada, work in Canada, automatic approval, big signs, and you can text with WhatsApp, big signs all across. And so the solution is almost sitting right in front of you, and Haley is the only person to actually talk about it. Trump has not mentioned anything about E-Verify. He's talked about poisoning the blood, many bad hombres, immigrants. He's implied, he hasn't directly said, but he's implied that immigrants are evil. They're ruining our culture. Only person to actually have a real solution on this was Nikki Haley. And everything was just substantive. I just compare her on these specific issues and talking about them versus Donald Trump, and you could see it's just almost this night and day difference. She actually has tangible plans, and we'll spend 2 minutes discussing actually how to achieve them. So all of this is to say that she would be, and we'll find this out later on as we get to talk with people, she would be the best general election candidate, frankly speaking. Now, some of the negatives about Haley is she's getting too clever by half and getting too slick. A lot of voters were unhappy that she did not take questions. They liked her before because she was very down to earth and would answer everybody's questions and stay. Although she did stay for pictures, and she stayed about an hour after her event to really take pictures with every single person and even spoke with them. And I thought that was kind of cool. Some candidates are too above that kind of stuff, but she wasn't. But again, too careful, too polished and repetitive if you've heard her before. But all in all, I think a pretty good speech. One, which was interesting, is she's trying to take a play for a lot of those Trump voters, is China. So here's her kind of her ringing the alarm bells about the situation.
Now let's talk about our number one national security threat, China. China's been planning war with America for years, and that's no exaggeration. They're already here. They've already infiltrated our country. They bought 400,000 acres of U.S. soil, most recently at Grand Forks Air Force Base, where our most sensitive drone technology is. They're pouring millions of dollars into our universities, stealing our research, spreading Chinese propaganda.
And this is particularly controversial. Haley has been called a neoconservative, a neocon, because of her support of the Ukraine. And a lot of people in the GOP who would previously be a little more trigger happy to get into war Trump, whether you love him or hate him, has taken this remarkably dovish foreign policy stance. And he continues that with Ukraine, where right now the U.S. is assisting Ukraine, as you know, with weapons. So Haley wanted to clarify her position, where some people are accusing her of wanting to send troops in and wanting to send billions upon billions of dollars. But I disagree with her point of view. I think we shouldn't give any aid and we should mind our own affairs. So I'm very libertarian and isolationist on foreign policy. So I completely disagree with Nikki Haley. But I thought it was an impressive explanation and a good one. And another thing about Haley, which everybody's saying she's trying to do everything perfect and trying to be all things to all people. Well, not necessarily, because she's not running away from the Ukraine position. And think about Ron DeSantis, who kind of flip-flopped on the issue because he wanted to get the anti-establishment, anti-neocon wing of the GOP. And she's not even trying, but she gives a compelling argument as to why she supports just continuing helping with arms for the Ukraine, not necessarily with anything else. So that was interesting.
The problem is no one is giving you the answers you deserve. So let's take them one at a time. You should know Ukraine was a great friend to us at the United Nations. They voted with us on almost everything. They supported all our initiatives, whether I asked them to or not. Here you had a pro-American, freedom-loving country who was invaded by a thug. 500,000 people have died or been wounded because of Putin. Now, I will be the first person to tell you, I don't think we should ever give cash to any country, friend or enemy, because you can't follow it and you can't hold it accountable. The second thing is we don't need to put troops on the ground in Ukraine, and they don't want them. They want to be able to win this themselves. But I do think we should give them the equipment and ammunition they need to win. And now, for any of you that are asking, why should we care about Ukraine? That's a legitimate question for you to ask. You should be asking that question. The problem is no one is giving you the answers, so I'm going to give you the answers. The reason you care about Ukraine is because I saw it every day at the UN. Terrorists, dictators, and thugs always tell us what they're going to do. They're amazingly transparent. Hamas said they were going to go into Israel. They did. China said they were going to take Hong Kong. It happened during COVID. Russia said they were going to invade Ukraine. We watched it. China says Taiwan is next. You better believe them. Russia said once they take Ukraine, Poland and the Baltics are next. Those are NATO countries, and that immediately puts us at war. This is about preventing war. It's always been about preventing war. Now, if we support Ukraine, that's only 3.5% of our defense budget. That's it. The Europeans are putting in more than that, and they should. It's their neighborhood.
And here you'll see the GOP of yesteryear, the economically conservative GOP of yesteryear. Haley is trying to shed away from the liberal image that people are painting her as. She's not really that liberal at all, but everything is relative, obviously. So they like to call her that only because she says she doesn't want a 6-week abortion ban. And she's still pretty bad on the abortion issue, quite frankly. But one voter will have an interesting point of view about that as well. But she was talking about budget, and she's hoping that Americans get concerned over this runaway spending. I think that's a thing of the past, sadly. I think there are very few economic conservatives anywhere, especially in the GOP, where they were kind of born and raised. I think the economic conservative aspect is a dying wing of the GOP. But she thinks there's still some people out there who care about the budget, care about the ballooning deficit. Probably a good thing to pay attention to. I wouldn't say I disagree with her at all. But you could see her making a play for, yes, the Republicans of yesteryear with her budget perspective.
If 8% of our budget is interest, quit borrowing. Cut up the credit cards. You have to balance a budget every day. I had to balance a budget as governor. Why is Congress the only group that refuses to balance a budget? The next thing we'll do is we'll take as many federal programs as we can and send them down to the state level. Think education, think welfare, think healthcare, think mental health. If all of those things are sent down to the state level, you're dramatically reducing the size of the federal government and you're empowering people on the ground. And then we want to open up the middle class. Right now we're watching the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. We're going to make sure that we eliminate the federal gas and diesel tax in this country. We're going to cut taxes on the middle class and simplify the brackets. And we're going to make the small business tax cuts permanent.
And continuing with that GOP hard-lined economic conservatism, she talks about Social Security and tries her best to defend herself about it. Because if you recall, early on when Ron DeSantis announced his campaign, the first opening salvo, the first opening attack on behalf of the Trump campaign was attacking Ron DeSantis about Social Security, saying that he was too liberal, too conservative on the issue, and he wanted to cut the Social Security. And that did actually create a tangible loss with older voters with Ron DeSantis. So now he's attacking Nikki Haley for having a very similar position on Social Security that Ron DeSantis has. But Haley tries to deftly explain her view and that she won't cut Social Security for the elderly. This view on Social Security represents the entire amalgamation economically, maybe minus Trump with the GOP. I would say Social Security is a sacred right. I would like to get it someday if I lived, although I smoke 2 packs a day, so I might die at 50. But if I live until 80, it would be nice to have Social Security or something like that. And as somebody who wants their citizens to be well taken care of, her position is flat out wrong, and it's a bad position in the general election. And on Social Security specifically, this is actually where Trump would have an edge over Haley in a general election on this specific issue. But I don't think people are going to nitpick over Social Security in all honesty and reality. And here, Haley directly addresses Trump, and you could see her walking that tightrope. And this is where I think Haley really is dropping the ball, because it's kind of, you should do all or nothing. So she has this have your cake and eat it too way to attack Trump on policy and say there's nothing personal. One of the reasons that Christie got such decent traction is because he did directly attract Trump. Of course, she wants to keep a lot of those conservative voters, so it's a tightrope that she has to walk. And I like a candidate to be more authentic on the issue and more honest and more direct. And there is this overcautiousness. She's not nearly as bad as Ron DeSantis, and she's a lot more likable. But there is this overcautiousness that Haley is employing, which is probably not a helpful thing.
So this is going to be silly season. You're going to hear a lot of other things, but this is what I'm going to tell you. Is while he's lying about me, I'm going to tell you the truth about him.
Yeah.
It's not personal for me. I have no, people either want me to hate Trump or love Trump. That's not what it is. I just tell it on policy. I'm not going to talk about him personally. I don't care about that. I think politics is too personal, and I think that's why people are so frustrated right now.
Right.
He has said he wants to raise the retirement age, the Social Security age, to 70. He proposed when he was president, he wanted to raise the gas tax up 25 cents. Those are things he needs to answer for. Oh, that's right, he won't get on a debate stage. Well, maybe you can ask him another time. Listen, Tuesday is a big day. Tuesday's the day you get to decide which area, how we're going to go in the country. I trust you. I trust you because I know 75% of Americans have said they don't want a Trump-Biden rematch. The majority of Americans have said they don't want their options to be two 80-year-olds for president. We've got to move past that. This is the chance to say, do we want more of the same, or do we want to go forward? We don't want more of the same with the Trump-Biden thing. We don't want more of the same where we've got 80-year-olds in D.C. We don't want more of the same where both of them are distracted by investigations and all these other things.
But, she's doing her best, as you could see, to get those conservative voters, and she already knows she has kind of the independents and left-leaning people locked up. And now we'll go into the interviews, and I'll talk about that. And I think the crux of this, I met quite a few people who are Democrats but are actually voting for Haley in the primary. They feel there's no Democratic primary. Obviously, I think there is. Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson, both quality candidates, are both running, and I am doing my best to eliminate that blackout. But a lot of people, if they're not watching my YouTube, probably never even heard of Dean Phillips or Marianne Williamson. So at least 6 Democrats that I spoke to are specifically voting for Haley because they like Haley. And take a look at this position. I interviewed a gentleman who wore a T-shirt that said, cops support legal weed. And I have something to admit to you. I used to do drugs. I still do, but I used to too. Wanted to use that old Mitch Hedberg joke. So I supported him. The only drugs I use is cannabis. But we certainly bonded over that. And Haley has not talked about cannabis. None of the candidates, except for Dean Phillips and Marianne Williamson, has vowed to end the drug war and legalize cannabis. And you think if you want to get a whole bunch of young voters, man, just say you want to federally legalize cannabis. You could snap your finger, create an executive order, and marijuana could be legal everywhere. So this guy, I really like this guy. He was actually a former detective for 20 years. And tell me, by the way, I've met so many interesting people on the campaign trail. I thought about spending an extra 2 days after the primary to go to these supporters' home. I have all their cards and info, and talk to them and interview them. So let me know if you think that's interesting. This guy is one of the people I think who would be a delight to speak with for an hour and has such an interesting experience. He is very funny. So he tried to take a picture with Nikki Haley with his T-shirt that's saying "Cops support legal weed," and the guy's like, "Oh, can you please put the jacket over the shirt, please?" So it's so funny how kind of ridiculously nervous and cautious her entire campaign is. And they got to shed that a little bit. But this guy was ultimately convinced by Haley. And take a look at his view on Haley's position on abortion. This is something I'll give Haley credit to. Her abortion position has been pitch perfect because it's not going to anger liberals because they feel the issue is already settled and she won't necessarily advocate for a national abortion ban. But for more conservatives, she still considers herself pro-life. So a lot of people say she's flip-flopped. She hasn't really flip-flopped on the issue. She's trying to have her cake and eat it too, but I think in a very intelligent way. So this guy was actually won over by her.
After Haley's event, have you come more impressed, less impressed, or the same?
Right. Oh, I'm more impressed.
All right, cool.
I mean,
So she kind of
said, here's the problem, here's the solution. Here's
Yeah.
the problem, here's the solution. Problem, solution. This is what I would do concretely here.
Yeah, a lot more substance than some other people just kind of mumbling and rambling on.
24 hours ago, well, exactly so. 24 hours ago, I was at the Trump rally.
Right. You get around.
Ramble on. I'm going to fix this, I'm going to fix that. No, I mean.
Where are the specifics, yeah.
None, and you know, it's like he said he'll fix the war in Ukraine in 24 hours. That's by cutting off all the aid. But he won't say that because it does a little. But bottom line is that's what he'd do, you know. And I agree with Nikki 100%. My dad was 26 years in the military, 2 brothers served, etc.
Cool. Yeah.
It's stay out of war by being strong.
Right.
Carries a big stick. So I love the way she articulated that. At least she brought up the thing with fentanyl. At least said something. But
She said a lot more than many other candidates are saying than Biden or Trump would. Yeah.
Right. My second issue is immigration. She's the first one I've heard in now my 3rd cycle in New Hampshire that said mandatory e-verify.
That's it. Well, you talk about Canada. You know, the reason there aren't all these Mexican immigrants in Canada is because they're able to get a visa anytime they want. They could just fly right up there, but they can't work.
Right.
And it's that simple. And he is the first person to talk about the e-verify stuff. Yeah.
And I just might say my second issue, and so that was
Cool. Yeah.
I yelled.
I like it. So you think you'll cross that voting booth for her? Still looking.
Well, you know, and now
I know you do your research. Obviously, you're going each and every one of these events.
As libertarian, I'm pro-choice and everything.
Cool.
On the other hand, it used to be all my life, if there was like, I can't, A and B are both sucking,
Yeah.
whoever's pro-choice. Well, now,
Right.
that's been decided. For
Right.
our lifetime, your lifetime.
Yeah. Right.
It's a states' rights issue.
Yeah.
So
Forever.
the issue of abortion has
Less
diminished
relevant.
for me.
Right.
And I think she's a regular woman who would do better by the medical reasons for an abortion.
And here is another really interesting person to speak to. This woman was a GOP state representative, a state rep in New Hampshire for 32 years. So she got elected 16 times to the state house. She decided to kind of throw away the Republican Party. She was a Republican for a very long time, but since 2006, and she was telling me, and especially because of Trump, and there's so many voters like that. She's representative of a big movement this is why Haley might actually win, because she's so fed up, but she actually liked Haley so much. Liked her in comparison to the last people standing, although she had some reservations about her as well. But still, you can see that Haley is bringing a lot of these disaffected Republicans to the fray, to the voting booth. And remember, New Hampshire, you don't have to be a registered Republican to vote in the Republican primary. You can be a Democrat or an independent, and you are able to vote in that primary. So New Hampshire is kind of unique. I think maybe 10 other states have that primary position. Usually you have to be a registered. Like, for example, I'm a registered Democrat, even though I have no loyalty to the Democrats. But living in New York City, I like to vote in the Democratic primary. So the Republican primary is meaningless in New York. So I'm a Democrat because I have to be a Democrat because I have to be a Democrat to vote in the primary, which is an election in New York that really matters. You don't have to do that in New Hampshire. But yeah, some interesting perspective from her.
Well, I think it's important for us to see all the candidates and hear them all. I think the speeches are a little bit canned, basically the same. I could have watched it on TV probably, but it's good to see them in person, especially if they take questions. I went to see Christie last week. I was very impressed with him.
A little more down to earth.
Yeah, he actually had some solutions, not just identifying problems. It's kind of good for him.
There's something unique about him where it was so much more substance that talk about the fentanyl and addressing the drug crisis, and then him actually taking every single question is, it's like I was mouthing along because I knew everything. Yeah. So I know what you're saying.
I was surprised that she didn't take questions.
Do you think that's going to hurt her? Because that's everybody liked that she took questions and was more down to earth to Trump. Do you think that might hurt her that she's not going to take questions anymore?
Well, I guess that's probably true.
And you think you still might? Are you going to vote for her, or kind of keeping an open mind?
No, I've got an open mind right now, but it looks like Biden.
Yeah. And have you been a Republican or a Democrat?
Well, that's an interesting thing. My first 14 terms in the legislature were as a Republican.
Interesting. Okay.
And then,
well, there's
in 2006 or something like that, I became a Democrat.
So you're one of those people that the media always talks about. They say don't exist, of Republicans that have been kind of so fed up with the Trump nonsense. Right.
When they got into this abortion business, that finally put me over the edge.
I'm a liberal Democrat from Salem, and so I'm here to make a block move in the primary. But if she, in the unlikely case that she does get the nomination, I will seriously consider voting for her. But I think the border is a disaster. I don't think it would be that hard to fix it. You just got to have the will. And I think men have, we men have made a mess of the world for 200 years, so maybe 1,000 years. So it's time. I think it's time for a woman's touch, and also a sane Republican in the White House that might be able to remedy the broken insanity of the Republican Congress. So a Democrat isn't going to fix it.
Takes one of them from within. Yeah.
So yeah, for those reasons.
Well put. Yeah. Well put. So that's interesting. You're one of those people say Nikki is that stronger candidate because despite everything, despite your loyalty to the party, Biden, and there's been so many issues you would consider pulling the lever.
There's been so many issues.
Right. Sure.
The economy's good.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff you aren't talking about. That's true.
I just think that the age.
Yeah.
And the border.
Right.
I don't see getting fixed. I'm not. I'm equally terrified about a Kamala Harris as president if he drops dead.
And here's somebody really interesting. This gentleman is a Democrat who is super enthusiastic about Nikki Haley and actually really doesn't like Biden. And even more so, he says he's not going to vote for Biden because he really doesn't like Kamala. And I think he is so representative of, I want to say, at least 10% of the voting bloc. Remember, if Biden and Trump have their automatic loyal base and there's 10% up for grabs, I think he's in that 10% block of Democrats who don't like Biden, think Biden does not deserve to be reelected. He cited specifically his age and the border issues, two very legitimate issues. But he's crossing over to vote for Haley, and he said he may very well vote for her in the general election. And that's kind of the tragedy of the entire Haley campaign. Anybody who's moderate, anybody who's independent, anybody who is wary of Trump would easily vote for Haley. And then Haley, I think, crushes, and the polls have been saying this. One poll had Haley crushing crushing Biden by about 17%. So she would absolutely crush Biden. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. But she might be, especially with the Ukraine and other issues, I think it's going to be tough for her to actually win the GOP primary. But she impressed some people today. So yeah, so that's kind of the crux. You can see what Haley represents. It's not surprising, but there are a lot of people who feel disaffected by both parties, who don't want to go for Biden, who would go for Haley in the general election. But of course, she has to win a primary first. Everything might change if she wins New Hampshire and she's able to get momentum. But ironically, her home state of South Carolina, I don't think will be that friendly with her. I think the more Trump-heavy of a state in the general election, the more they'll hate Haley. So Haley is doing well in New Hampshire because New Hampshire didn't vote for Donald Trump. It's still considered a swing state, but it went Democrat. And so she just doesn't have those states that are friendly to her on her agenda. So yeah, thank you guys. I appreciate all of you watching. Some last minute food for thought. A few people have been commenting, including Carrie's one of my big supporters. Thank you that I look dapper. I appreciate that. I like to dress up in a suit when I go to an event. It's easier to kind of meet people, and I always like putting in a little effort. So if you see me dressed up, that means I usually came back from an event. I think it's like 1 a.m. now, but you go and eat dinner and walk the dog and everything, and then it takes quite a long time to edit. So hope you like the analysis. A lot happening in the future. Looks like I'll go to maybe even 2 Trump rallies, so that'll be interesting. See Marianne again, and let me know. Let me know if you'd rather me see Marianne or try to see Nikki Haley again or Dean Phillips again. But now there are less candidates. I think now at this point I've seen every candidate but Ron DeSantis who is running, and Ron DeSantis is not coming to New Hampshire. But that's the last thing too. Haley should be smart and try to debate. I think she's running away from that, which might not be necessarily the best move. But she's running strong. She has the enthusiasm. She's a good candidate. I wouldn't say she's a great candidate. That would be my general assessment. And she's a little too cautious. She should have She should have had an opportunity where people ask for questions, because I think people do end up respecting her even more for that. So I think that's a lost opportunity. And if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And I think she's trying to fix it a little too much. But my final prediction, I think Haley will actually beat Trump by 1%, 1 to 2%. And then I think she'll lose South Carolina she'll get good momentum and she'll lose by a respectable enough 10%. And then she'll get crushed in Super Tuesday. That's what I think is going to happen. She might drop out before it's Super Tuesday. So even me, who's not pro-Trump, I'm giving you the subjective source. I think at the end of the day, Trump has it locked up, but the primary process may go on for much longer than people actually think. So that's generally my perspective. But thank you all guys for watching. I appreciate it. I also uploaded that Marianne Williamson video. Some people are asking for that, so that is now up. And I've gotten some new subscribers because I uploaded a few Nikki Haley shorts explaining her position on the Ukraine and her position on Trump attacking her. And boy, do people on the internet fucking hate Nikki Haley with this deep, burning passion. That's the biggest problem for Haley, is Ron DeSantis didn't have the same amount of hate that Nikki Haley has. He never did, even when he was running only 10 points below Trump. Yeah, people called him a simp. People simp. People use of simp. People love to. I think it's such a stupid expression. But they call him that and all these other things. But boy, I mean, first it was cool because the videos got quite popular. But there were 20 comments, saying F Nikki Haley, yada 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 yada. So the level of vitriol from, unfortunately, commenters probably within the GOP coming at her is like nothing I've really ever seen since Hillary Clinton. I think it's not as bad as the vitriol against Hillary. And that might have been a lot more deserved. But boy, is it extreme. So Trump people just hate this person in a way that they don't hate anybody else. And that's why I think Haley needs to lean in and attack Trump more, because they already hate her. So you may as well grow some balls and just say this guy is a potential rapist and this guy might be a criminal, and he's arguably, and his rhetoric inspires violence and hatred and racism. I don't even think Trump is racist himself, but he inspires and he intentionally inspires through his advisors like Stephen Miller. He intentionally inspires racism. So I think she should just go out and say it and then call him some stupid names like a fat ass or something. Just get in there, man. That's my perspective. Because I think she can get real, and when she does, she's actually very cool. And she should lean into that more. Not that she'll pay attention to me, but thank you guys for following, and I appreciate the continued support. You have a good night or morning at this point. Bye-bye.